All presidential campaigns are about federal spending, whether it's about more money for health care and education or less for something else. Voters have a chance to make a difference. That certainly goes for the largest portion of federal spending for national defense. It's a part of the budget being spotlighted by a number of groups in the Elephant in the Room project. Our guest is the coordinator for that project, Eust Eustis. Thank you very much for being with us, Eust.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, tell me a little bit about the groups that are backing the project. Who's on board with this right now?
Sure. So we have Massachusetts Peace Action Education Fund. We have the Watertown Citizens Education Fund, American Friends Service Committee, amongst a few others. So it's a bunch of folks in Boston who have been organizing on anti-war and peace issues for decades.
Well, in the current budget that's already approved into this year, I think the figure overall is more than $700 billion. I know that's a lot of money, but compared to what would you say?
Yeah, so we can actually put it in perspective of what other countries are spending. So the U.S. budget, it is $738 billion. That's actually more than the next 8 highest spenders in the world combined. So that includes China, Russia. So it's just a huge sum of money, just a disproportionately huge amount poured into our military compared to any other country in the world.
Now, you can pick out things in this budget that sound reasonable. Give people in the service a pay raise, for example. There might be some technological advances we need to keep pace with. So, but what about things that maybe don't make as much sense?
Sure. So there actually is a lot of spending in our Pentagon budget that isn't even going directly towards our military. So for example, the Poor People's Campaign has done some research on the budget, and they found that 50% of the Pentagon budget is actually going to private contractors. And so, for example, Lockheed Martin, one of the biggest military contractors in the world, was getting just as much pay as the State Department and the USAID departments combined, just for perspective.
Well, I mean, I grew up in the age of what used to be called the military-industrial complex. Mm-hmm. They are private contractors, but a lot of contractors do things for the government. Sometimes we get our money's worth. So what's wrong with these contractors?
Just the fact the huge sums of money that they're making are just, so if our budget is $738 billion, they're making hundreds of billions of dollars. And this is more fueling these corporations, and it isn't necessarily fueling the research. It goes to the CEOs who are raking in just huge super profits. So again, this isn't directly funding necessarily the research. It's just people who are at the top of the chain raking in huge sums of money.
What do you want voters to do with information like this? Because one of the things I did is I went to at least one website for a candidate. I know what Trump wants because it's his budget. Right. I looked at one of the other candidates. I'm saying, I don't see a lot of detail here about what they want to keep and what they want to cut. I mean, isn't there something wrong with that?
Right. So that's actually the point of the Elephant in the Room campaign, is that we're urging all of the candidates to speak out in more detail about their plans, because voters deserve to know whether a candidate is going to cut the military budget and by how much. So we've actually only had one candidate so far speak in any detail on this issue, and it's actually Steyer, who created a $100 billion education plan, $100 billion education plan that would be funded from cuts to the defense budget. That was the most detailed plan we've heard. We've heard candidates talk about wanting to cut the military budget and other departments they would like to reallocate funds to, such as working on issues of climate change, education, transportation. However, we haven't heard dollar amounts from many other candidates. We had Elizabeth Warren, who was speaking on cutting the Overseas Contingency Operation Fund. However, she didn't really talk about where those funds would go in any detail. So we've got a lot of vague comments, but not specific plans from candidates.
Well, I'll add one more. Bernie Sanders, he talks about more money for healthcare, obviously. He talks about more money for education, student loans. I know he wants to raise taxes for some people too, but when I try to add that up, I'm saying, wait a minute, what does that mean about defense?
Right. Yeah. So we do have. There's been a lot of groups doing like the Poor People's Campaign who have proposed a new budget for our federal budget, and most of these include large cuts to the military budget. They've identified all these places it would be easy to make some cuts and reallocate funds to fund these very expensive programs like the Green New Deal and healthcare for all that the Democrats are talking about. So yeah, that's what we are hoping the candidates will speak about in more detail, whether that's the plan or whether they are planning to get the funds elsewhere and keep the military budget as sky high as it is.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Eust Eustis from the Elephant in the Room Project. People my age, we're used to hearing about all this spending on the military budget. We don't think it will ever change, maybe. We don't think it will ever affect us much worse than it is right now. You're a lot younger than I am. What do you see looking down the road 20, 40 years from now?
Yeah, so I have hope that we actually can make a change. And there has been, this large military budget predates Trump's time in office. This has been been around for the past, few decades, and is a deep part of the American culture, the military-industrial complex. I have hoped that we can make these changes with the right candidate in office. I believe that there are many places where this money can be reallocated just because of the immense almost like wasteful spending that goes on in the Pentagon. So as a young person, this is an issue I really care about because there are so many urgent needs in our country right now. And I think this is a place where we can get the funds to address these urgent needs at home.
Speaking of urgent needs, how about climate security?
Sure.
Isn't that going to cost us something?
Yeah, that's going to cost a lot of money. A couple billion, I believe, is the number they've estimated. And, that is just a tiny percentage of what we spend on the military budget.
Finally, Eust, we should mention if people want some more details about this, is there a place they can find that online somewhere?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a website. It's www.elephant-room-project.org. And we have a lot of info about our campaign as well as about the military budget on there.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Right. Thank you very much.
Eust Eustis from the Elephant in the Room Project. Still to come, we'll tell you about a free performance to celebrate International Women's Day. But first, this message.